We're going to have him back on tonight, and that's Jeff Woolwine. And let me get you his bio here. Jeff Woolwine is one of the premier videographers of UFOs in the Phoenix area. For years, it has been theorized that Native Americans saw UFOs and carved images of them in the local mountains in Phoenix. Jeff Woolwine has proved this to be true by matching his video footage of UFOs to the petroglyph carvings. Jeff also makes a connection between these petroglyphs and the Phoenix lights. He believes that many of the UFOs seen over Phoenix are actually other life forms unknown to us, and has found 4 hotspots there for observing them. Jeff also tells the true story of Phoenix and the Mayan tombs and gold that is still lying buried under the sacred mountains. Jeff has been interviewed on many TV and radio talk shows, sharing his extraordinary research. So don't miss his local hero, which is Jeff, of course, of our UFO community, as he presents his UFO footage, taking us deep into the heart of the mystery and wonder of the petroglyphs in the sky, which I certainly love that title. Jeff has done many, many news reports in the Phoenix Valley and on cable TV shows, presenting his UFO sightings and rock art theory. Jeff also was in the pilot for the TV show called UFO Hunters. It was published in UFO Magazine. So please welcome Jeff Woolwine to the show this evening. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me back.
It's wonderful to have you back. It's been such a long time. It's like you've been in a wormhole somewhere. I know you've been doing a lot of stuff, so tell everybody what you've been up to. It's been a while.
Oh, wow. As you mentioned, I'm a sky watcher out here in Phoenix, and I've been studying the Phoenix lights and studying the phenomenon here in the Phoenix skies. Not only here, but, around the world from other people's UFO sightings that constantly message me and send me links on Facebook to check out their UFO stuff. And it's really fascinating. It's really neat to come out here and actually see these things, in person and see other people's sightings also. It's really quite meaningful, because for years, people have been seeing things in the sky and really haven't, deciphered on really actually what they were. And but it's kind of neat when you come out here and you investigate the Native Americans' legends and folklores and rock art that's carved up here on the mountains. Clearly, they're identifying these types of carvings as UFO sightings. We have video cameras back then, the way you and I do, to record their sightings. They had stone boulders, and they recorded their sightings, their special events on rocks in areas scattered throughout the landscape, not only here in Phoenix, Arizona, but around the world. It seems like the same Native American tribes or tribes throughout the world is carving or telling the same exact stories all over the world. So it's really fascinating. It's really neat to see and witness these things. And so, yeah, it's awesome.
It is, and I love the research you're doing, by the way. You're so genuine. That's what I like about your nature. You're good-spirited. What's interesting, when you talk about the whole sightings around the world, it is like one big collective experience. And I like the way you correlate the events on the rocks and the landscapes. In other words, their historical archives or benchmarks are really written in the sands of time and the illusion of it. I mean, they're imprinted in rocks. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think the correlation, these people contact you from around the world, but what is there anything similar insofar as their experiences versus what you've seen for sightings?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're seeing these orbs in the sky, whether they're white orbs or black orbs, and there's tons of sightings, a lot lately around the world. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. And, investigating the Phoenix lights, it's my opinion, because I've witnessed these things firsthand. I missed the 1997 Phoenix Lights March 13th event, but I did clearly witness them and videotape them the summer of 2004. Mm-hmm. And, in watching these things and studying these things, I'm not out there saying that there isn't, technology, spacecraft, other people from another world. I mean, clearly, the scientists have found, 7 Earth-like planets that, could support life, intelligent life, and sure, what's the possibilities on them making some kind of spacecraft and visiting Earth? Sure, I don't have a problem with that. I've seen many things in the sky that could resemble a craft, but I really think the majority of sightings that we're not only seeing here in Phoenix and around the world, especially the Phoenix Lights, is not a craft at all. You see 5 lights out there, you're actually seeing 5 entity beings, highly intelligent beings. It's not some spaceship like everyone claims to have witnessed out here. Matter of fact, there's no evidence of a spacecraft actually going over the city of Phoenix. Basically, what we have is a string of lights gathering up the energy on the fault lines here. And basically, that's what's pretty much going on here. This is the reason why these UFOs visit hotspots around the world, is because of the fault lines or ley lines or energy lines. The sun, the Native Americans track the sun out here. And they say that when the sun gets in the right position, it opens up these doorways for these entity beings to come and go, some say into the underworld, but basically to absorb the energy fault lines. And so when 1997 Phoenix Lights event occurred, the stories shot out across the world that this spacecraft went from one end of Arizona to the other end of Arizona. I've been studying this. I've seen tons of videos on this, and there's not one evidence proof, not one video, nothing to suggest a spacecraft. But basically what was going on here is these lights were actually absorbing energy from one mountain range to another mountain range to another mountain range. So
That's
basically
wild.
they jumped. Yes, they jumped from one energy spot on the top of Arizona. They saw a bunch of lights there. And then all of a sudden the lights came here to Phoenix. We have the famous 1997 March 13th light. Jumped to another part of Arizona. And so basically they were jumping from one spot to another. And, because people really didn't understand what they were seeing, the news, the information has not brought to them yet on actually what was going on. They automatically assumed that it was a spacecraft, which is fine, but in my investigations and in my studies on seeing these lights on a regular basis and seeing them in the daytime, and, some believe, and I believe, that, once you make the connection with these things, it's like a type of contact, if you will. Going up on South Mountain out here, investigating the petroglyphs, watching the skies for so many years, you get used to these things, and these things get used to you. And, it was weird when I started seeing them. Now it's weird that I don't see them, if you can follow me, So,
yeah, so
I witnessed these.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you real quick, though. What do you think they are? Are they interdimensional? Are they a kind of machine, symbiotic? What exactly are they?
Well, this is another entity. This is another life form. Another type of creature, I guess you could call them. I don't know.
But something intelligent.
As a scientist, right. Just as the oceanographers are finding new species below the ocean floor, this is a new species above the ocean floor that the scientists failed to recognize and failed to admit that these things are here. But clearly, yes, there is something flying around in our skies, and not only here, but around the world. And yes, somebody higher in the office here is watching what's going on, as far as the white Cessnas, the black helicopters, Who knows what these people are, but yes, they've been watching these things a lot longer than I have, and probably anybody else has. They know exactly what's going on here, but they fail to admit that there is something here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always the denial. So can I ask you real quick, was power lost during these sightings? Do you know offhand? I mean, when everybody saw these sightings, I guess the ones over there with the Phoenix lights, did they lose power in the cities at all, or no?
Not at that time.
Okay.
Investigating the Phoenix lights, that's a great question. And investigating these lights in 2004, I was perched up on a set of bleachers at a local college here. And I was overlooking the east side of South Mountain. Now, I followed these lights. I was on a quest. I was on a journey. I was on a hunt to track these things down. These things actually helped me in a way. I was at my apartment complex. I'm sky watching. I'm looking for the lights. I did my history on them. I did my research on them. I knew that they showed up on the east side of South Mountain. I knew to look on the eastern skies and things like that. And then lo and behold, I had two orange amber lights appear in front of me. They moved west towards South Mountain, moving east to west. And so I basically followed them. And through the whole summer of 2004, I watched them over a power plant, boiled down. Now, this power plant is boiled down into a fault line that turns on the electric here in Phoenix, Arizona. It's just one of many that turn on the electric here in Phoenix, Arizona. And, it's interesting, going back a little bit further research on these things. We have a nuclear power plant, nuclear power plant Verde power plant that's out here. It's way outside of Phoenix. Now, that power plant controls a lot of states here. And I have seen photographs of these lights over that nuclear power plant. Now, it's very interesting that in the year 2004, I saw a newscast that they were shutting down some of the nuclear power plants to do maintenance on them, and they were turning on the electrical power plant around the valley here to help us out during the summer because, it gets really hot here in the desert, and we use up a lot of energy with our air conditioners and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so in the summer of 2004, I'm watching these lights, and I forget what month it was, but a grid shut down. A major grid got shut down here in Phoenix. Now, they had to pull in a whole new grid system from California on a 17-wheeler that took almost a week to get here. I'm sorry, it was a 22-wheeler? I don't know. It was a huge Mack truck, and it took about a week to get here. Now, that shut down offices buildings. That shut down some of the hospitals. That shut down some of the houses, and it was kind of a major problem. And it just made me think, because these things are over the power plant. They're absorbing the energy from the power plant. And I've seen photographs over the nuclear power plant. And I just think that, someone kind of knew, if something was to go wrong at the Palo Verde power plant, that it could cause a meltdown. It could cause a breach. So just in case, they turned on the electrical power plants to attract these things to that spot. So just in case something went wrong, it wouldn't cause a nuclear meltdown. And it did. It did. Something did go wrong here, and thank God it wasn't the nuclear plant, but it was the power plant that got shut down. And so, yeah, and you know what? Investigating the holocoms, we'll go into that here in a few minutes, who the holocom is. They're the first Native Americans here in Phoenix, Arizona. Finding the maps, the lost maps that aren't available today, but they are in my book. We'll talk about that later. It shows that at the east side of where that power plant stands today was the heart of the city for the holocoms. Now, holocoms, they're sky watchers. They were watching for these lights. They were watching for these UFOs, these serpents, these spirits, if you will, and studying them and watching where they lived around the valley and on the mountains here around the Valley of the Sun. They wanted to get as close as they could to these things. And it just so happened that that was one of their hotspots. That was one of their main cities, if you will, was right there where that power plant sits today. So that's telling me, you know what, they were seeing lights there, they were seeing things there, you know, way before the power plant got there.
Right. Who's to say the power plant isn't drawing energy from them, Jeff? You know, I mean, if they were there prior. Can I ask you real quick, what do they look like? Is it look like an orb of some kind, or what is the appearance of these things?
Ooh, man. Oh, boy. Here we go. Okay. So, you know, the lights, you know, at nighttime, they glow red. You know, orange, amber. Sometimes they have a dot in the middle. It's really neat watching these things just appear in the sky. They do a formation, and they disappear in the sky. I mean, it's fascinating. It's beautiful to watch. You know, when you're seeing these things, you know, you're just at awe on what it could possibly be. You know, so, you know, I've been on many news reports out here, and the end result, and everybody's end result, was that we're seeing flares, okay? And that's totally preposterous, you know, flares from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base about 150 miles away. Now, that's crazy. I've been out there. I've seen the flare droppings. I've seen the airplanes drop the flares. These flares are tiny. They don't stay in formation, and sometimes you can see the parachutes. You can clearly see the smoke because that's what the illumination flare does, is it lights up everything, so you're going to see the smoke. You're going to see the parachute, and you're also going to see the anti-collision lights from the airplanes dropping these things out. Now, clearly, during the Phoenix lights and when these lights appear, there are no airplanes around. Not yet, anyway. We'll get to that in a minute. But there are no airplanes around. These things simply appear in the sky, do a formation, and then disappear. So after the news report, you know, 2004, the end result is I'm seeing flares. I'm saying, no, this is crazy. You know, in my investigations, I learned that these things like mountains. Why? Why mountains? Okay, well, let's go move to the mountain and just check it out and watch. Let's sit by that mountain and see what happens. So that's what I did in the year 2005. I bought an apartment, and it was perfect on the east side of South Mountain, about a mile away from the mountain there. And I could see, you know, clearly that rock, that mountain. And if anything was going to get past me, it was because I was sleeping or I was in the restroom. I sat next to that window all the time. For 2.5 years, I sat there and waiting to catch something during the day. And lo and behold, it didn't take me very long. I was seeing these, sometimes it was a black orb would come down, and so let's say for now they would land on the mountain, if you will, or absorb into the rock. We'll go into that later if you like. And then they would leave. They would leave the mountain, okay? Now we have, I was explaining to this on my tour today on South Mountain. Now we have many different entity life forms. The Native Americans, they call these things shape shifters, and that's exactly what they do. They shape shift. And many different life forms for many different shape shifters, if you will. So without getting too technical, some of them resemble a flying snake, if you will, a serpent, much like the Quetzalcoatl that we find out here in Mexico. They're flying worms. They're flying serpents. They morph. They shift shape. They look like a snake. Then sometimes they look like a flying cross. Okay, they're shapeshifters. And then we have ones. I had one that flew by my window and made video of the day here in East Channel 3 that looked like a spider. That looked like a tarantula. Wow. And that really made me go back to the Spider Woman that the Navajos say taught their ancestors, like how to weave their baskets. Is they watched the Spider Woman weave her web in the sky, and this is how they were able to learn to weave their baskets. That's one of the Navajo traditions that they say on how they learned how to do their baskets. And another one was like a flying red cross came by my window. Orbs connected together, doing triangle formations, and so it goes into really a lot of different types of shapeshifters.
It's fascinating.
You know, the spirals out here. There's spirals that are carved out here on South Mountain, And there's like 60%, 70% of the petroglyphs out here on the mountains, at least South Mountain anyway, are spirals. Now, this doesn't represent water at all. This represents the doorway into the underworld, if you will, or into the energy spot.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of background on the spirals. Okay, if they go counterclockwise, if they go clockwise, it's the doorway in. If they go counterclockwise, it's the doorway out. If the spiral ends down, then it's a doorway. Now, sometimes when you look at the spirals here on these boulders, you'll see cracks. There'll be cracks in the boulders, and 9 times out of 10, if this is a hot spot, you'll see a spiral entering the crack of that rock, and that's letting us know that is the doorway into the underworld. If the spiral ends up, then we're talking Phoenix lights. We're talking there's a doorway in the sky there, and they simply appear in the sky and then disappear in the sky. The doorway is up top there.
I love the way you decode this, Jeff.
So,
Let me ask you something real quick. How did you figure this out? Did the elders tell you this, or did you just figure it out?
This was interesting. In 2004, I started seeing UFOs, and I really wanted to study them and find out what was going on. So I learned everything I could about UFOs, from the Roswell to a lot that has to do with the Bible and some Native American folklore, things like that. And so I was seeing UFOs, and I was studying them, I was watching them, and by coincidence, I saw a TV program here in Phoenix, and a Native American was up on South Mountain conducting a tour, and he was talking about the petroglyphs. And he came across this one carving, and it was a six-figure man, and one of the gentlemen there said, well, this six-figure man looks like he's looking up at something above his head. And Dave Morris, the Native American tour guide, and you can still find him at the Pueblo Indian Art Museum down here on 40th Street and Washington, I believe it is. I believe he still works there. He came back and he said, yes, that's part of the interpretations here, is that our ancestors might have seen things in the sky and recorded them on the rocks. Well, holy cow, that just put off a big light bulb in my head, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, we have strange lights in the sky, now we have strange markings out here on the rocks, there's got to be a connection. Mm-hmm. So after I'm still studying, I'm still working on it, I'm still doing, by that time, I'm up to watching the lights in 2004. By the time 2005 rolled around, that's when I contacted Dave. And I said, hey, you know what, I saw you on television. I didn't tell him who I was, I didn't tell him what I was doing. I didn't tell him that I've been on the news. I didn't tell him anything. All I told him was, hey, you know what? I saw you on television. You're talking about the petroglyphs. Could you take me and a friend of mine up there, and could you explain, the Native American myths and everything you could tell me? And would it be okay if I documented it, if I videotaped it, And he was like, sure, come on down. So we spent about 2.5, 3 hours up around South Mountain together. And he went over the giants, he went over the spirals, he went over the spirits. He really went in depth into a lot of information. And I just, at the time, I'm thinking, Phoenix Lights, spaceships, little green men from Mars, and he's telling me that the cracks of the stones are doorways. And I'm thinking, well, how can a big technology spacecraft get into a tiny crack like that, and I'm like, wow, it just blew me away. And so after we were done, that's when I told him, I was like, are you familiar with the Phoenix Lights? He's like, oh yeah, sure, there was somebody on the news last year talking about it. I'm like, yeah, that was me. He's like, wow, that was you? And I'm like, yeah. I said, I believe that there's some kind of connection out here with the strange things on the skies along with the strange glyphs out here that's carved on the rock. And he knew I was right on. He knew I was on to something. I just blew him away with, everything. And from there, it just went on from him to a couple shamans that I've talked to around the valley here, and I got into more depth, more detail on what's going on here, because, you know, he works for the archaeologist, and the archaeologist doesn't talk about these things, and, you know, Dave could probably lose his job if he goes into stuff, or even if he deals with me again, you know, because this is, you know, to some Native Americans, this is taboo stuff. You are not allowed to talk about this stuff. We are not supposed to know about what's going on here. So for someone like me to come in and to, I don't know, interfere or just to break grounds with this is just not thinkable. It's not, you know, no one has done this really before ever, you know.
Well, you're a pure spirit, too. The thing about you, Jeff, you have a nice pure spirit. It's not like you're going to contaminate this. But there are some people with malicious intent, and that's the problem I think that they're concerned about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, I'm going into this, you know, I'm not, you know, because there's a lot of skywatchers out here, you know, that want to exploit what's going on here. They're out to make money. They're out to sell DVDs. They're out to sell movie tickets, you know, and from the first get-go, I was not into this. I'm not into it to getting famous. I'm not into making any money at it. You know, I'm doing it because the way I see it, you know, I didn't find UFOs. UFOs found me. I just simply started watching back in the sky. The more I investigated, the more that they were coming to me, and I was seeing them more and more and more. And the more, you know, there's got to be a reason. There has to be a reason on, you know, what I'm doing and what's going on. And you know what? When he was telling me, you know, the cracks, the doorways, you know, I'm thinking spacecraft, you know, until 2005, when I actually witnessed, and the camera's been witnessing this, I have a witness, I've been filming all this crazy stuff, that these things actually absorb into the rocks. Yes, they go into the rocks. They go into these canyons and these crevices here where these spiral markers are. And that's when I came to the conclusion that this is not a craft. This is not a spaceship. Sure, like I said earlier, there could be crafts out there. I've seen some things maybe that are crafts, but when I was filming out here, it's not. This is something completely different. This is another life form. This is another entity. You know, this is another being. You know, and once I started filming the exact same thing that was carved on the mountains out here, you know, I don't believe anyone has ever done that before. For many, many years, it's been theorized that the Native Americans might have saw things in the sky and might have recorded them on the rocks, but no one has actually taken the time to prove it. But I did. I sat by that rock for many years. I videotaped many, many strange things going on over there. I went out on the mountain. I went out in the field. I investigated the glyphs, and I came to the conclusion that, look, man, that is what's going on. These petroglyphs are in the sky, and that's how I came up with the name Petroglyphs in the Sky.
I love
because that's exactly what is going on here. Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. Because, yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. And once I found out that I was right, you know, that's when I took it to the news, and the news media just ate it up. This is a new theory on the Phoenix Lights, you know, that no one's ever done before, you know, and they just ate it up. And that was the whole point to my investigation, to prove this theory and to put another shed of theories, of topics, of thoughts into people's head on what exactly maybe these lights are. You know, because for years no one has really done this. It's been a theory, or it might be a craft. Oh, there's people in windows that are waving to me. I mean, lots of crazy stories are going on out there, but no one has done the research as much as I have done. And that was the whole point, is to get people talking about this and to get people back out in the mountain and investigate it for themselves and to watch it and to see it. Because when you do, it will change your life. It will change the way you think. And you will clearly know that, look, man, we're not alone, and something is going on here. And I can go into a lot more other stuff if you like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. You're on a roll, and it's a fantastic roll. And I do want to get into your book, Petroglyphs of the Sky, but let everybody know what you're doing with the tours. I know you did a tour today. Can you give a description as far as how people could actually go on a tour with you and what you're doing out there?
Sure. I've been doing tours ever since 2005. I've taken at least maybe at least 100 people up on the mountain. And we basically go on about a 2 hour and a half, about a couple hours, 2.5 hour walk through the mountain, through this trail I like to take, depending on how long we take breaks, how long we talk about petroglyphs, you know, how the weather is doing, if it gets too hot. You know, it usually lasts about 2.5, maybe 3 hours, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we go over the petroglyphs on what they mean. We go over the landscape. We look at tombs that are out there. We look at altars that are out there. And we look at some of the pottery shards that are out there. We look at the old Holcomb canal systems. And, oh, yeah, it's awesome. You know, if you go out there with an open mind and you're ready for a good adventure, it's not even a hike. It's a walk. You know, and this is really easy. I take people up this trail. We'll talk about that if you like a little bit later. But I take people up this trail, and there's tons of petroglyphs there. Some are blown up. We'll talk about that too if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, you know, it's awesome. And you know, tours are always free. Donations are appreciated. And but yeah, I never charge anybody. You know, people call me up all the time. You know, hey, I saw you on the news, or hey, I heard you on a radio show, or hey, I saw you on YouTube or Facebook, you know, and hey, let's get together, you know. I had a good friend of mine, he contacted me, he saw me on YouTube, or no, he saw me on the news, and he wanted me to do a lecture out here at Mesa Community College about the holocoms, and yeah, that was
Nice.
awesome. You know,
Well, that's wonderful.
I've been all over the place.
Well, yeah, I
it's
encourage
awesome.
people to
It's neat. I
contact
love it.
you. I really do. I think they should give you a donation for your time. That's just me, but I think that, you know, you have so much knowledge when it comes to this area, and that if I was out there, I certainly get some time to go up there with you. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, we're going to dive into this. And also the Petroglyphs of the Sky, your book is actually live now, right? It's available for purchase, right?
Well, you know, I'm waiting on the publisher.
You're still waiting on publisher.
It took 15 years. Yeah, it took 15 years of research, 15 years to make the book. And in it, I go over the petroglyphs, what they all mean. I go into the theories. I go into the Native American myths. And I go into what the spirals and the cracks and the canyons and what the holocoms are doing and where they went and what they mean. And I go into how you can actually contact these things, on where the hot spots are around the valley to actually witness these things, where the tombs are. I'm not saying where they located at, but you know, the whole point is to get the audience in the book and to make them think, wait a minute, you know, he's got photographs of tombs, he's got photographs of altars. You know, he's got stuff that the archaeologist is not talking about. What's up with it? You know, he has found documents that has been buried for over 80 years in the government department in the downtown Phoenix library that no one has seen before. You know, that's all in the book, you know, and that goes into more detail on what's going on at South Mountain that no one has been talked about for 80 years, you know, and so, yeah, there's a lot of information in that, and regardless if they like it or not, there's tons of photographs, just beautiful photographs of the landscape, of the petroglyphs. You know, if you're not into stories, if you're not into myths, if you're not even into UFOs, you're going to love the photographs, you know, that I've been taking over the years. And, yeah, so it goes in.
You got to get that out there. So we've got to get it out there with a publisher or a PDF or something so people can access it and start purchasing it, because I know you do have a lot of great documentation that needs to be looked at.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's great. It's awesome. And, you know, I was the first person to do this, you know, when I was doing the cable show, the UFO Hunters on History Channel. I did the pilot for them, and then about a year or two later when the show got running, they came out and we did a normal show. And, you know, at that time, you know, this was all new stuff to them. You know, no one has really been saying, you know, entities, creatures, Nephilim, fallen angels, you know, blah, 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 this crazy stuff. It's all been technology, spaceships, crafts, you know, all these things. And they're telling me, now, Jeff, don't go saying, entities, don't go saying spirits, don't go saying live living beings. They're like, you're filming some bizarre stuff, and the people are not ready for this yet. He's like, they're just not ready. You're filming some weird things, and they're just not ready for this. If you're gonna talk about them, you need to say craft, you need to say spaceship, you need to say something that they will understand. And I'm like, dude, these things are here. It's not a craft. Sure, there might be craft. I've seen some things might look like craft. It could be a craft. But no, what I'm seeing here, what I'm filming here, is something different. It is not a craft. It's a creature. It's supernatural. It goes into biblical days, and so, and I got a lot of ridicule. There were people out there teasing me. Oh, this guy's on drugs. Oh, this guy's filming balloons. He's filming flares. Blah, blah, don't listen to this guy. He's not credible. He's thinking supernatural things. He's saying, entities and spirits and just off-the-wall crazy nonsense. I put up with this for years, but I knew I was right. I stuck to my guns, and to this day, no one has duplicated besides something real, as far as CGI or any of that crazy crap. No one has ever proved that I'm filming anything but what I'm saying I'm filming, besides the people who are just now starting to see these things in the sky also, who are video recording flying serpents, flying orbs, flying crosses, just weird things, and they're emailing me, And so, like, for years, I was getting ridiculed, and then now, about in the last 10 to 11 years now, the so-called experts are just now coming to the conclusion that, wait a minute, maybe these things aren't craft. Maybe this is something else. And I'm like, dude, didn't I say this back in 2005? What is going on with you? I have never, not once, gone back on anything that I've been saying for the last 20 years. I'm continuing to see them. I'm continuing to say, look, this is what my opinion is, And, a lot of problems that I was getting into is, once I found out the true history of the holocron and who they were and where they possibly went, because nobody knows where they did, up and vanished, and once I studied the petroglyphs, and they're talking giants, we're seeing altars out there, we're seeing tombs, we're seeing a lot of crazy things, that the only conclusions, the only thing that matches is biblical stuff, is the Bible. When we're talking Nephilim, when we're talking Genesis 6, when these things were cast down to earth, and the people here in the earth worship these things as gods, they performed sacrifice, it was chaos, it was bloodthirsty giants. Oh my God, that's what we're seeing out here on the rocks. It is so neat that we can read this stuff in the books of the Bible, and then we can go out on the rocks out here on the mountains and actually see the photographs of what the Bible is talking about. And that was a lot of problems that I was having, and sometimes still have trouble convincing some of these so-called experts and some of these other skywatchers out here, on what's going on. But once you look at the evidence, and I have presented the evidence in the book, the evidence is overwhelming. The data speaks for itself. And so in my mind, I'm, convinced this is what it really is, that these entities are, angels. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. When we look in some of the books of the Bible, it talks about these things in the sky. For instance, Exodus and the book of Numbers, when Moses is, taking the Israelites out of Egypt. Clearly, they follow the thing in the sky by day and a pillar of fire by night. The book of Numbers says that this thing sat in the sky for a year. They pitched tents until that thing in the sky started to move. So basically, this story is talking about these people following a UFO in the sky for 40 years. And who was it that brought the people into the promised land? It wasn't Moses. What happened to him? He was up on a mountain. He got taken away by a light. And this thing in the sky brought the people into the promised land. So there's UFOs all over the Bible, and people fail to look at this. They fail to acknowledge this. I've talked to preachers about this. They don't want to talk about this. They don't want to talk about giants. They don't want to talk about Nephilim. But yet, clearly, in our history, it is written in stone that, yes, there were giants here. Yes, there were things falling to earth here. Yes, this goes deeper than what everybody is, willing to admit, and I think
we've had giant skeletons. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Elongated head. Okay, the tour I was taking up with, her name was Heather. It was the second tour that she's done with me in the last year and a half or so. She's talking to this archaeologist about elongated skulls. He's saying, no, there's no proof of this, but look at Peru and other corpses and other mummies. And yet we have a carving out here on South Mountain of a six-figure man with a elongated head looking up at a barbell UFO. Now, this is interesting, too, because, the archaeologist out here, he fails to admit the tombs. He fails to admit the altars. He fails to admit that the mines were here along with the holocaust. He fails to admit a lot of these things that I had discovered and have backed up and proved in the government archives that has been tucked away for 80 years. I dealt with this guy. I've been on TV with him. I've been on the news with him, and he clearly doesn't get it. It goes over his head. If he does, he just doesn't want to admit it. But in his book, the archaeology book about South Mountain and the petroglyphs, he shows this petroglyph. Now, he's drawn. That's the thing. He drew most of the petroglyphs in his book, and he leaves out a lot of significant things when he's drawing them to replicate them in his books. He's drawn wrong stuff. Okay, so the guy with the elongated head, he draws it as a guy with a normal head. But when you go out there and you find the petroglyph that he drew, no, that is not the case at all. He failed to put a long head in that book,
Wow.
So, yeah, a lot of things are going on, and that doesn't make sense. But I went past the archaeologist. Clearly on him. He doesn't know what's going on. I've been out on the field. I've been doing this for so many years. I located the tombs. I dug up the information. I've talked to the Native Americans on what's going on here. I've gone a lot further than what that guy is to admit. And who knows? He might lose his job. Maybe that's why he's keeping hush-hush about things.
Well, he should. Sometimes they censor on purpose, too. That's the whole thing. It's that whole sanitization. They sanitize everything.
Yeah, and this is going on all over the world. Even Zahi Hawass out there in Egypt, he won't admit that maybe possible the giants or somebody, better than the Egyptians made those pyramids.
Right.
He's so high over heels and saying and convinced that the Egyptians made the pyramids, when there's evidence that maybe the giants made those pyramids, or maybe some other entity made those pyramids.
Right.
So this conspiracy has just gone all over the world, and it's been continuing for years, and it's going to be really hard to stop this. But the only way to stop this conspiracy is for people like you and I and Skywatchers to overlook the BS and go out there and investigate it yourself.
Yep.
And, this is why I wrote this book, is for people to take in consideration what I've done out here. I've written everything that I did out here, and all they have to do is just follow my footsteps, follow what's going on in the book. And after a year, if you haven't seen a UFO, then there's something wrong with you, because you just don't want to see them. You'd rather see flares, you'd rather see balloons. Okay, well, this book isn't for you. But if you want to see UFOs, follow the book. Follow what I've done over the last 20 years. And look at the hot spots. Look what's going on at South Mountain. Look what's going on at the tombs there. Look at the altars. Look at the holocaust and what happened to them. Study the rock art. You be the investigator, and you make up your mind on what's going on. And that is the only way to get this conspiracy out of circulation and into the truth of the hand.
That is so true. Yeah, that's it. Boots on the ground. There's no doubt about it. And that's why your work is so significant right now. Yeah, people are so swept away. It's not even funny. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the tribe itself. You say they vanished. Can you elaborate on what happened to them, or do you have an idea what transpired?
Oh yeah. Sure. Yeah, I have a big theory on what's going on out here. So let's talk about this. So Hohokam means, it's a Pima Indian name for the Pima who are gone. The people who are gone, the people who vanished, or the people who got taken away. Now, the Pima consider themselves ancestors to the Hohokam. We have the Pima tribe still out here. Excuse me if I pronounce it wrong, but the O'odham, I think that's how you pronounce it, tribe that consider themselves Pimas, Hohokam, they're all together. And so, the archaeologist wants us to believe, well, the Hohokam lived here for 1,000 years and it got too hot, so they migrated somewhere else. Okay, if that's the truth, where did they go? Okay, there's no evidence on where these people went. Even when you and I move, we take our belongings with us when we leave, but yet the Hohokam didn't. They left all their belongings there and simply vanished, disappeared. All right, so the archaeologist wants us to believe they went away. We can't find out where they went. But when you investigate the petroglyphs and you talk to the Native Americans that will talk about this subject, because like I said before, a lot of them will not talk to you about this. It's very taboo. And if you're trying to talk to somebody and he does not want to talk to you about this, that is the guy that you want to talk to, okay, because he knows what is up. He has been taught through the years, his ancestors, from generation upon generation upon generation for the past 1,000 years. The Native Americans know exactly what happened to these people. They know what the rocks are mean, and we'll go into that. We'll go into this here in a minute. But, the Native Americans who will talk to you on this, they will tell you that the devil came from the east and took the people away. Now, this is interesting because when we go out there and we investigate the petroglyphs, it shows these flying serpents, these crooked snakes or flying crosses, picking people up by their heads and carrying them off into the sky. So basically, they were taken away. They were gone. Now, the story goes on to say that when all this was happening, there were people that were witnessing what was going on, and they were scared, and they ran into caves, and they hid. And when it was all over, they were like, what the heck just happened? They were terrified. They did not want to live in this valley no more. They considered this valley cursed, and they refused to stay in this valley. They buried all their gold tombs. They buried the stuff here, and the survivors, they left this valley knowing that this place was cursed, never to reside here again. And that was the way it was going for 400 years. Nobody lived in this desert, in this Valley of the Sun, in Phoenix, Arizona, for 400 years after the Hohokam was taken away because of fear. And they all migrated back to Mexico. Right. There was tribes that lived on the outskirts of this valley, but they would not step one foot into this valley because of what had happened to the Hohokam, the people who are gone, the people who are taken away. Now, this is interesting, too, because when we read 1 Thessalonians, it says that we will be caught up into the sky to meet the Lord for judgment. Now, this is interesting. The key words are, we will be caught up into the sky. Now, the petroglyphs and the folklore and the legends here saying that the Indians were caught up and taken up into the sky. So I'm thinking, was this a possible rapture back in the day? Was this a rapture for them? Because this is what we call a rapture, the 1 Thessalonians. We call this a rapture. So was that a rapture back then? What was going on? The giants were here. The flood was here. I was talking about the Superstition Mountains that's out here in the Valley of the Sun on the west side. And, the Lost Dutchman's gold, that's nothing to compare to what the Indians say that mountain is. In that day, we had the Hohokams living here in the valley, and we had the Apaches living on the Superstition Mountains. Now, the Hohokams, they weren't really a war-Mongol race. They did perform sacrifice for these entities, for the gods here. The Apaches were watching what was going on here. They pretty much kept their distance. Every once in a while, they would try to make war with these things. But, the giants were here also, the bloodthirsty giants. Now, when Noah's flood was going on, the legend goes on to say that the lead giant was terrified. He did not want his people to perish in the water. So he told his people to run over here on the west side on top of this huge boulder. And all the giants ran over to this boulder. And the lead giant used his magical powers to raise this boulder up, but the waters kept coming. So he used his powers more to raise this boulder up higher to get away from the water, but the water was still coming. And he used his powers so much it became this huge mountain, but the water was still coming. It was over the mountains now. It was coming. They were going to drown. And in his last bit of strength, he did not want his people to perish and drown. To immortalize them, they turned them all to stone. And to this day, you can see on the bottom of the Superstition Mountains, the giant in a praying mode. You can actually see the layers upon layers upon layers of the mountain that has been risen up out of the earth. And you can see up on top the giants that have been turned to stone. They still reside up there on the top of the mountain. But when that happens, the water stops. The flood stops. And to this day, you can see the watermark along the side of the mountain there where the flood stopped after the giant. Now, this is very significant because we find stone giants, the legends of the stone giants all over the world. We were talking about Bryce Canyon. There's some stone giants there. Camelback Mountain out here in Phoenix, they have a stone giant on its mountain, and then along with the Superstition Mountain.
Wow.
So, yeah, let me get
That's wild. I'll tell you what. And of course, like we were touching on, they do have skeletons, and the Smithsonian supposedly got rid of and destroyed quite a few of those skeletons that were connected to giants, along with, selling them to private investors. And, we're going to have a break real quick. Everybody, you're listening to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris, BlueRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Jeff Woolwine. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.